Hello everyone. I welcome you to another session Beyond Grief and Loss. In this session, I would like to share with you a real life story and how grief coaching helps when somebody experiences personal loss. Grief and loss are not new to humanity. We all have been through it at some point or the other. So you will learn along with me the personal loss and the impact it might create, what kind of consequences it may lead to, and how, when you hire a grief coach, life completely shifts from the suffering to recovery. I present to you a story of Rachel. This was a case where Rachel had experienced personal loss and recovered through grief coaching. So, this was close to around 17 years ago. Rachel was brought up by her aunt because she was an orphan and her aunt was everything to her. She not only brought up Rachel but also took care of her younger brother. And Rachel grew up into a bright, intelligent girl, very cheerful and very humorous. Life went by as always, but one fine, fateful day, her aunt complained of a sudden chest pain. Even though Rachel was a medical student, she was in a very early experience of her profession. Despite that, she took her aunt to the hospital as early as she could. Unfortunately, her aunt died right in the middle of the road in a huge, heavily packed traffic jam. They couldn't reach the hospital and she met her fate. This left Rachel with not just shock and pain, but a very traumatic experience that were to stay with her for a very long time. In her past work experience, not in the medical field but as some odd jobs she did to support her aunt, she kind of saved some money. She was ambitious, someone like any other girl next door. Her interests were more into reading. Her hobbies were into gardening. She was in love with nature. But this particular event left her devastated. It shifted her perspective towards life and faith. She no longer believed that any kind of good deed or a good work or helping others would anyway help her, because the trauma that she went through, the values that she was given by her aunt, she was shocked that nothing came to her rescue, not even the faith that she held so closely to her heart. This negative influence of this particular personal loss due to a sudden death of a loved one left her bitter, filled with resentment, a paradigm shift in her thought process, and a complete change in the way now she looked at life. 10 years passed by. Even though she completed her higher education, she turned out to be someone very different from what exactly her aunt had envisioned for her. Most of the time she kept to herself. She had very few friends and she stayed stuck in the past, resisting change or any kind of positivity. This impacted not her prospects of being a good doctor, but also as an individual. She turned out to be someone very difficult to deal with. The way people knew her was someone who was just to herself, very self centered, and very focused to the point, who had her boundaries so closely drawn that she wouldn't allow anything, not even an iota of humor, to touch her. There were times in her span of 10 years, this was after her aunt's demise, and before she came to me for coaching, she also had worked in several healthcare centers, of which she spent a very short amount of time in each. Her complaint was she couldn't really get along with people. And there came a time where she was completely lost. Now, friends, when you look at the scenario that I'm sharing with you and the character traits or the symptoms in simple words, these are not of a person with any kind of mental ailment or somebody who's just been diagnosed with depression. No. This is a person who's completely stuck in life because of a past trauma that has shifted her perspective and now is running on several thinking errors, which are also known as cognitive distortions. On account of this, there is a change in the persona. And this usually happens when we undergo some kind of crisis. We don't take help and we just try to do it all alone by ourselves. Oftentimes, most of my clients ask me, if someone is going through personal loss, why would they need a coach? Because time is the best healer. And there where I explain them with this example that I had coached for 3+ years, that not everything we encounter as grief and loss, we can so easily process it and move ahead. Personal loss, specifically when a sudden death, when we lose our loved one to sudden death, it has a cascading effect. It lasts for very long, to the extent that we don't even realize. So when Rachel came to me, and she was referred actually by one of her very old friend who was also her mentor. During our first 3 conversations and sessions we had, the whole issue, the problem looked very different. I have not included those details here. But there was one point which brought us to understand why Rachel is today someone with such high held boundaries, lonely, sad, in pain. The kind of thoughts, completely negative, influenced her so much that now she runs her life on several such thoughts. That she's a non-starter, she doesn't deserve this, there's no point doing good, there's no scope, no hope, and no future. That's the kind of impact a personal loss may have on us. At one end, it might look like a person just skipping jobs because of monetary issues. but the real reason is basically the unprocessed complex emotions that are suppressed, that people do not know what to do with it. They assign wrong meanings to it. They just don't process their emotions the right way, and as a result stay stuck in the past for a very, very long time. Now, another interesting question a lot of people ask me: how do you as a coach help somebody who's just experienced or have had experienced a personal loss? Very simply put, a grief coach uses various techniques, and I would do the same. Coaching has a plethora of very powerful tools and techniques which not only helps a person become a bit more self-aware of the influence this grief has had on them, which phase of grief they are in, how it has now begun to show up in the other key areas of their life, and what can be done the best way to get out of it forever. So in case of Rachel, I helped her first by helping her understand, making her a bit more self-aware of all the key negative things and approach that she had adapted. What was the root cause, where it actually began, and then what can be done so that we build a plan and move ahead with it. Now, a very key important thing that I would like to mention here is, anytime people move ahead after experiencing a personal loss, this is not that you're trying to forget or you're trying to undo anything. No. A personal loss is a loss. What we are trying to move ahead with is the new defined reality along with the personal loss. Nobody can get back the dead. Nobody can undo the unfortunate outcomes or the crisis that has happened. But yes, with the past and with all that has really changed the person, one could really help become aware of it and then build a forward action plan so that one learns to accept the reality, the new defined reality, and move ahead along with it, not without it. This is precisely how I assisted Rachel, and perhaps may assist many others who find themselves stuck because of a personal loss. That's it, my friends, for today. I hope this session was able to provide you the required details that you would need to understand how grief coaching or a grief coach works. These are my coordinates. In case you want to speak with me, you could connect with me directly or reach out for further details on my website that's given here right on the screen. Thank you.